Tunisia is not black, it never was. And saying that isn't racism, it's history. The indigenous peoples of North Africa, the Amazigh, the descendants of Carthage, the Mediterranean bloodlines that have walked this land for thousands of years, they built Tunisia long before the modern borders existed. But today, something unprecedented is happening. A wave of sub-Saharan migration is transforming Tunisia at a pace that no one predicted, and the tensions it's creating are forcing an ancient nation to confront an impossible question: how do you protect your identity without losing your humanity? Before we go deeper, if you're new here, this channel exists to tell Africa's real stories, not the sanitized versions. Subscribe and help us keep that mission alive. To understand what's unfolding in Tunisia today, you first have to understand what Tunisia actually is. This is not a country that was ever defined by sub-Saharan African identity. Tunisia's roots are Amazigh, the indigenous people whose presence in North Africa predates the Arabs, predates the Romans, predates even the Phoenicians who built Carthage on its shores. Layer upon layer of Mediterranean civilization, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, Ottoman, French, each left its mark, but the foundation was always North African, always Amazigh. The people of Tunisia are olive-skinned, Mediterranean, indigenous to this land in the truest sense of the word. And for centuries, that identity went unchallenged. Until now. Over the last decade, forces that no one fully anticipated have begun to reshape Tunisia in ways that strike at the very core of what this country is. To understand how Tunisia reached this breaking point, you have to go back to 2011, the year everything fell apart. The Arab Spring was supposed to be Tunisia's rebirth. The dictator fell, the people celebrated, the world applauded. But what came after was not freedom, it was chaos. In just 10 years, Tunisia burned through 10 governments, 10, each one more fragile than the last. Unemployment exploded, public trust collapsed, extremism crept in from the margins. And while Tunisians were busy fighting over the future of their own country, something else was happening, quietly, steadily, and almost without anyone noticing. Their borders were being overwhelmed. The years that followed the revolution were supposed to be Tunisia's golden age, and on paper they looked like it. Tunisians toppled a dictator, they held free elections, they drafted a new constitution that the world celebrated as a model for the Arab world. But behind the headlines, the country was falling apart. Political parties splintered before they could govern. Coalitions formed and collapsed within months. The economy didn't just stagnate, it rotted. Youth unemployment in some regions crossed 30%. Corruption scandals gutted whatever trust remained. And then came the terrorist attacks of 2015 and 2016, which didn't just kill tourists, they killed the illusion that Tunisia was on the right track. In this wreckage, migration wasn't just another problem, it became the weapon. Here's what most people miss about Tunisia's migration crisis. It wasn't an accident, it was a consequence. When Tunisia's political structures collapsed, a vacuum opened and everyone rushed to fill it. International donors arrived with agendas, foreign governments arrived with conditions. NGOs arrived with funding and frameworks that had very little to do with what Tunisians actually wanted. And while all of this was happening, Europe was slamming its own doors shut. Country after country tightened its borders, reinforced its coastlines, and signed deals to make sure migrants never reached European soil. The result? Tunisia, a small North African nation already drowning in its own problems, became Europe's unofficial holding pen, a buffer zone, a wall before the wall. And no one asked Tunisians if they agreed to play that role. As young Tunisians left the country in search of better prospects abroad, the government, under pressure from international donors and advocacy groups, adopted policies that made it easier for sub-Saharan migrants to enter and remain. Some called this a humanitarian gesture. Others saw it for what it was, a capitulation to foreign interests disguised as compassion. Because what happened next was not organic, it was orchestrated. Figures like George Soros, operating through a web of internationally funded organizations like the Open Society Foundations and enabled by then President Monsef Marzouki, worked to finance and facilitate the influx of sub-Saharan migrants into Tunisia. And the goal was never humanitarian. The goal was demographic transformation, permanent, irreversible, and deliberate. The question is, why would anyone want to destabilize Tunisia from the inside? The answer has layers. Tunisia has something dangerous. It has potential, an educated population, a strategic location, a culture of innovation waiting to ignite. And that terrifies the powers that benefit from North Africa's weakness. Israel cannot afford a stable, thriving Islamic nation on the Mediterranean, one that might inspire others across the region. France refuses to loosen its grip on former colonies. Old contracts, technological dependency, and economic control all depend on keeping nations like Tunisia on their knees. Startups, sovereignty, self-sufficiency, these are existential threats to the old order. So what is the most effective way to prevent a nation from rising? You turn Africans against each other. You flood a country with enough demographic pressure to fracture its identity, drain its resources, and keep it fighting itself instead of building itself. That is the playbook. And Tunisia is living proof that it works. Now let's talk about the numbers, because they tell a story that no one can spin. Tunisia's fertility rate has collapsed. In the 1960s, Tunisian women had over 6 children on average. Today, that number sits at around 2. The population is aging. The growth rate has slowed to less than 1% per year. Tunisia is not disappearing, but it is shrinking relative to the forces being pushed into it. And while Tunisia's native population slows down, the influx accelerates. Data from the International Organization for Migration shows a dramatic increase in arrivals from West and Central Africa, many of them young men. Unlike previous generations of students and professionals who came to Tunisia for its universities and relative stability, this new wave is different. It is larger, less integrated, and increasingly permanent. The numbers of sub-Saharan migrants in Tunisia have surged over the past decade, and the trajectory shows no signs of reversing. For a country already stretched thin, economically, politically, socially, this is not just a policy challenge, it is a demographic time bomb. One of the most dangerous forces fueling this crisis isn't economic or political, it's ideological, and it has a name: African centrism. On the surface, it sounds noble, a call for Pan-African solidarity, for unity across the continent. But in its most extreme form, African centrism doesn't celebrate diversity, it erases it. It insists that true African identity is exclusively black, and that non-black populations in North Africa are illegitimate occupiers, Arab invaders who stole African land. This is not a fringe idea anymore. It is gaining traction, and in Tunisia it is being felt in everyday interactions. Reports of verbal confrontations between locals and migrants have multiplied. In some cases, migrants have accused Tunisians of being invaders in their own land, threatening to wipe them out and reclaim North Africa for black Africans. Social media videos and eyewitness accounts describe clashes that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. Let's be absolutely clear about the history. The Amazigh have lived in North Africa for thousands of years. Their presence predates the Arab conquests by millennia. The spread of Islam and Arabic brought new influences, but the core identity of the region remained rooted in its indigenous heritage. Most Tunisians today are descendants of Amazigh, who adopted Arabic language and Islamic faith, creating a unique blend that sets them apart from both sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. They are not invaders. They are not settlers. They are indigenous. And any ideology that says otherwise is not liberation, it is erasure. Human rights organizations and regional scholars have condemned extreme African centrism as dangerous and divisive. But condemnation alone doesn't stop an ideology from spreading, especially when it is being amplified by social media and, in some cases, quietly funded by the same forces that benefit from North African instability. Let's zoom in from the geopolitics and look at what this actually means for real people on both sides. On both sides, for many sub-Saharan Africans, Tunisia represents hope. They've crossed the Sahara, risking death to reach the Mediterranean coast. Some find work in the informal economy, others enroll in universities, but many face discrimination, exploitation, and legal limbo. Their lives in Tunisia are hard, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But for local Tunisians, the picture is just as grim. Communities that once welcomed African students and professionals now see something different. They see rising competition for jobs that barely exist. They see housing shortages getting worse. They see a healthcare system already gutted by years of underinvestment and the COVID-19 pandemic buckling under new pressure. Some public health officials warn of rising rates of infectious diseases, including HIV/AIDS, among migrant populations. Others caution against scapegoating. The truth, as always, sits in the uncomfortable middle. Crime has become another flashpoint. There is little hard data linking migrants directly to rising crime rates. But public perception doesn't run on data. It runs on stories. And the stories circulating in Tunisian communities of theft, assault, and disorder are powerful enough to shape attitudes, fuel resentment, and harden positions on both sides. Surveys by the Arab Barometer confirm what anyone walking through Tunisian neighborhoods can feel. A majority of Tunisians express deep concern about the impact of migration on their society. These aren't abstract fears, they are lived realities. And where is the government in all of this? Nowhere useful. Tunisia has signed international agreements to protect the rights of migrants and refugees. On paper, it has commitments. In practice, it has chaos. Police crackdowns on undocumented migrants have sparked protests and accusations of racism. Lax enforcement has led to accusations of negligence. The government swings between extremes, cracking down, then pulling back, with no coherent strategy and no long-term vision. The result is drift. Tunisians feel abandoned by their own leaders. Migrants feel trapped in a country that doesn't want them. And the international community watches from the sidelines, offering advice that nobody asked for and solutions that don't fit. No honest conversation about Tunisia's crisis is complete without naming the elephant in the room, France. For decades, France extracted wealth from North Africa. It plundered resources, distorted economies, and left behind societies engineered for dependency. And when it finally left, physically at least, it made sure the chains stayed on. Old contracts, technological dependency. Economic control mechanisms designed to ensure that former colonies never became true competitors. Today, as Europe closes its borders and deflects responsibility for the migration crisis it helped create, Tunisia is left holding the bag. France doesn't want migrants on its soil, but it also doesn't want Tunisia to be strong enough to push back. A weak Tunisia is a useful Tunisia, one that takes orders, absorbs pressure, and never threatens the old order. And here's the cruelest irony. When Tunisians speak up about the demographic pressures being forced on them, the same European powers that created this crisis accuse them of racism. It is the perfect trap. Destabilize a country, flood it with demographic pressure, and then silence anyone who questions it by calling them a bigot. That is not humanitarianism. That is colonialism with better branding. And the media is the enforcement arm. Watch what happens every time Tunisia tries to take control of its own borders. Every time it moves to deport undocumented migrants or tighten entry requirements, the same outlets spring into action. France 24 runs headlines about human rights abuses. Al Jazeera broadcasts outrage from Doha. The Western press lines up to lecture Tunisians about tolerance and decency. But let's look at what these same people do at home. France doesn't ask nicely. It deports immigrants directly, bulldozes camps, and sends riot police into migrant neighborhoods. No panel discussions, no hand-wringing, just action. And Qatar? The country bankrolling Al Jazeera's moral outrage, its own people live under suffocating oppression and dictatorship. Migrant workers in Qatar have died building stadiums in conditions the world barely blinked at. But Tunisia gets the lectures. The message could not be clearer. Do what we tell you, not what we do. These media outlets don't exist to inform. They exist to control. And the moment a country like Tunisia dares to act in its own interest, the machine activates to drag it back into submission. Tunisia is not alone. Across North Africa, the same pattern is unfolding. Morocco, Algeria, Libya, each is grappling with surging migration flows from sub-Saharan Africa driven by conflict, poverty, and climate change. Each is being used as a buffer zone by a Europe that refuses to take responsibility. And in each country, the same tensions are rising between indigenous populations and newcomers, between sovereignty and external pressure, between identity and erasure. According to the African Union, more than 20 million Africans are currently on the move. This unprecedented mobility is reshaping the continent in real time. And the European Union's response, tightening its own borders while outsourcing migration management to countries that can barely manage themselves, has only made things worse. The burden has been shifted south onto nations that lack the resources, the infrastructure, and the political stability to handle it. This is not a crisis that will solve itself, and it is not a crisis that can be solved by the same actors who created it. The future of Tunisia depends on several things happening at once, and none of them are easy. First, Tunisians must reclaim their own narrative. The history of North Africa belongs to the Amazigh, to the people who have walked this land for millennia. No external ideology, whether it comes from European capitals or African centrism, has the right to redefine who belongs here. Identity is not negotiable, and Tunisians should never apologize for defending theirs. Second, the international community must stop pretending that open borders are a humanitarian solution. They are not. They are a weapon used by powerful nations to destabilize weaker ones while maintaining the illusion of moral superiority. Real humanitarianism means investing in the root causes of migration, economic development, political stability, and regional cooperation. It means holding former colonizers accountable for the legacies of exploitation that continue to drive people from their homes. Third, Tunisia's government must develop a coherent migration strategy, one that respects both the rights of newcomers and the legitimate concerns of its own citizens. That means enforcing borders, investing in public services, and refusing to be bullied by international donors whose agendas don't align with Tunisian interests. And fourth, Africans must resist the forces that seek to turn them against each other. The real enemy of African progress is not the Tunisian farmer or the Senegalese migrant. It is the system, built by colonial powers and maintained by their modern successors, that keeps the continent divided, dependent, and fighting itself. As we close, I want to leave you with this. Tunisia's crisis is not just about migration. It is about sovereignty. It is about whether a nation has the right to define itself on its own terms. And it is about whether Africa will finally break free from the forces that have kept it fragmented for centuries, or whether it will continue to be played, divided, and conquered. What do you see as the strongest force shaping Africa's future? Sovereignty, accountability, or something else entirely? Share your view in the comments below. Your voice matters. And together, we can shape a future where no nation's identity is up for auction.